Cellular respiration is the process through which our cells get the energy they need to perform daily functions. Seeing that all living things have cells and all cells need energy, cellular respiration is necessary and all cells must go through it. There are two types of cellular respiration, aerobic and anaerobic. For aerobic respiration, it occurs mostly in eukaryotic cells. These cells contain both a nucleus and organelles. Still, the process of aerobic respiration takes place in the mitochondria, otherwise known as the powerhouse of the cell. There are three main stages that occur during aerobic respiration: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle, and the electron transport chain. In glycolysis, this process takes place in the cytoplasm of a cell. During this, a 6-carbon molecule, glucose, is partially oxidized and broken down into 2 pyruvate molecules, which are 3-carbon sugars. While the pyruvate is the main product of glycolysis, 2 ATP molecules and 2 NADH molecules are also produced. In the Krebs cycle, this process takes place in the membrane of the mitochondria. As the molecules travel into the mitochondria, the pyruvate molecules produced in glycolysis lose their CO2 and turn into acetyl-CoA. Then a coenzyme A is attached to the acetyl-CoA using sulfur as its connection and producing acetyl-coenzyme A as the final product. Throughout this entire process, the energy is released and stored in NAD+ and FAD. Small amounts of ATP are produced in the cycle, however, once NAD+ and FAD molecules are reduced to NADH and FADH2, they move into the final stage of aerobic cellular respiration and produce more ATP. The ATP produced is substrate-level phosphorylation because a phosphate is added to the ATP, and GDP because it's directly adding a phosphate to the substrates ADP and GDP. In the electron transport chain, this process takes place in the mitochondrial membrane. During this process, the energy not released from glucose during the Krebs cycle is released by the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain consists of a network of electrons carrying protein in the inner membrane of a cell. Throughout this process, the electrons, along with the protons, will be added to oxygen. Once the electrons and protons are added to the oxygen, water is produced instead of ATP. However, when the protons are moved across the cellular membrane, ATP is produced. During chemiosmosis, the hydrogen ions are moving with the concentration gradient and move through the inner mitochondrial membrane with the help of the protein ATP synthase. During ATP synthase, an inorganic phosphate group is added to the ATP produced, and the diphosphate becomes a triphosphate, creating ATP. Only the phosphorylation process requires free energy, but the chemiosmosis does not. This is oxidative phosphorylation because it requires oxygen. That's our team. In anaerobic respiration, the entire process is in the cytosol, and the only ATP is produced during glycolysis and no more in the further anaerobic stages. Glycolysis is the stage for both aerobic and anaerobic processes, and again, the molecule glucose is broken down into 2 pyruvates and 2 ATP molecules. For both processes, they go through fermentation. In alcoholic fermentation, which mostly occurs in yeast and wine products, the pyruvates convert into ethanol molecules after carbon dioxide is cut off and hydrogen fills the space. Since the hydrogens come from the electron carriers, this frees the electron carriers to continue with glycolysis and make just enough ATP to survive. In lactic acid fermentation, an example of this is muscle movement, and when you work out, your muscles run out of oxygen, and the muscle ferments into lactic acid and change the pyruvate into lactic acid, breaking down the oxygen and adding hydrogen. This also allows for just enough ATP to be created in order to survive.